I'm Amber Duke.
I'm Ben Weingarten.
I'm Emma Waters.
And I'm Will Chamberlain.
And this is NatCon Squad, where common good and common sense meet. NatCon Squad is produced by the Edmund Burke Foundation, the home for national conservatism. You can subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. As always, a great show for you today. Happy news up at the top. Inez is not with us this week because she is having her first child, which is lovely. So please pray for her and her husband as they have this joyous occasion in their lives. And with that, we'll get into the topic rundown for today. I'm going to kick us off with Kamala Harris and her campaign attempting to reach out to male voters as the gender gap widens. Ben is going to cover the DOJ's efforts to fight Virginia for removing illegal aliens from their voter rolls. Emma will cover the SpaceX developments. Apparently, we have reusable rockets now, pretty insane. And then we'll talk about a police body cam footage that came out of Fairfax County, Virginia, that showed an assailant attacking a police officer with a knife and what the conversation politically has been surrounding that story. So with that, I will kick us off. The Kamala Harris campaign, as I mentioned, is trying really hard to win over male voters. They've found in the polls that her gender gap with women is not overcoming the amount that she is losing men by to Donald Trump. And they know that they have to win a higher proportion of this demographic to have any chance of winning the 7 key swing states in November. And so they started this pretty desperate pitch, which places Tim Walz, of all people, front and center of their outreach to rural male voters. And this past Friday, actually, they launched Hunters and Anglers for Kamala Harris Coalition, which I come from a hunting family, and I don't know a single one of them who is supporting Kamala Harris or would be swayed by this coalition. I ended up talking to quite a few hunters and conservationists for an article at The Spectator about this, and they pointed out that the Biden administration has been pretty hostile to hunting and fishing in general. So the idea that they're going to win over these voters now with this display of supposed masculinity is pretty hilarious. They have closed millions of acres of public hunting lands. They banned lead tackle on national wildlife refuges. They shut down shooting sports opportunities in Bears Ears National Monument. Biden actually attempted to defund school programs, public school programs that would teach hunter education and gun safety. And the only reason it didn't happen was because Congress unanimously passed a bill to reverse his order, and Biden basically had no choice to sign it because it was such an unpopular position. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, of course, have both expressed support for various gun restrictions, including banning so-called assault weapons, which often includes all semi-automatic weapons as the left definition. And then Tim Walz showed up at the opening day pheasant hunt in Minnesota with nothing other than a semi-automatic shotgun, which a video showed he didn't even know how to load. There was this incredibly awkward 1 minute, 30-second video where he has the gun basically propped up on his groin as he's trying to load it. And he spouts off the name of the gun and one of the quick facts from the specs on the Beretta website, but doesn't realize that you're supposed to load the first shell in the side of the gun, rack it, and then you can load the rest on the bottom. He tries to load all of them from the bottom, awkwardly racks the gun 4 times, and it's just a disaster. It's exactly why this whole pitch is doomed to fail, because the Kamala campaign lacks the authenticity to appeal to men, and they don't really understand what true masculinity is. They view it as something that they can cosplay or that they can use stereotypes to appeal to men without really getting to the basic understanding of what most masculine men view as being a man. That's their fundamental problem. It's kind of funny to watch, though, because we get these amazing viral clips. Tim Walz, again, stalking around without, in an earlier clip, without a shotgun, walking around in the field prior to the pheasant hunt. And they have not by the way, mentioned what hunters and anglers are supporting Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. There's apparently going to be some national organizing Zoom call this week. But usually when you launch a new coalition like this, you have a list of very prominent people who are sort of the leaders of that coalition. And they have not done that. So I wonder if they even had anybody prepared or if they were hoping people would come out of the woodwork. But I would say that that's probably not likely. There's been panels on MSNBC of New York Times columnists, female New York Times columnists, and MSNBC commentators, also female, belly aching about Kamala's problem with men. And you even had Obama going to Pittsburgh and blaming the fall of Black male support on misogyny, saying that it's not about the issues, it's that they're coming up with excuses to not vote for a woman. So I guess I'll kick it over to the group. Do you think that she has any chance of helping her numbers with men? Is there any message that the Kamala campaign could use that might gain traction? I mean, I think we all probably agree that the message they're putting out right now is not it, but is there something they could say that could help close this gender gap?
It's a good question, Amber. And I think it's just so polite of the men to let us jump in and tell Kamala Harris's team how to improve the male vote on behalf of the men. But it's pretty shocking just how bad it is. So I think the most recent numbers this week show that among Black men, Kamala Harris only has about 41% of the vote, which is significantly lower than Joe Biden, even lower than what President Obama had when he won. And with the Black vote in general, losing even that much could risk the entire race, right? So we're not even talking about the male vote overall. We're talking about the male vote in very particular groups of people that are so essential for her ticket. So it certainly is, I think, a dire position. I'm not sure, frankly, if there's anything they could do or say at this point that would actually engage the male vote in a meaningful way. The Man Up video of like 5 different rural men saying, to be a real man is to be in touch with my emotions and to like support women is just like the least. Yeah, I don't see how you're actually compelling or drawing any more men into this equation. It seems like they've lost it on every level. Red meat has been banned and attacked anywhere they can possibly do it. Red meat is right wing, right? Working out or high testosterone, also right wing and something that they don't like. So any opportunity they had to actually engage men in a very masculine way, they've just shot down in every opportunity. So it seems like a lost cause at this point, but potentially the men in the group will have some more insight about what Kamala Harris could say to them to really compel them to vote.
And that video that you mentioned, the ad that was created for the Creators for Harris Coalition was made up of paid actors. Somebody found out that all these people had profiles with acting companies and had all appeared in like low-level movies and TV shows. And I think half of them were gay. So yeah, really great job there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd say, well, first of all, there's nothing that they're going to be able to put out there that is going to swing the male vote, my opinion, because none of their positions are consistent with anything that would remotely resonate with masculine males who, by the way, like I thought masculine men are toxic and they hate that constituency. So that's a starting point of a problem. And we could go into the far deeper and more philosophical conversations about is kind of eliminating masculine men part of the Democrat strategy. Obviously, family dislocation and destruction of nuclear family and replacing it with the state is certainly has proven core to the progressive agenda. But what I would say is the Beyond Parody commercial flows naturally, I think, from the pick of Waltz as well as a vice presidential candidate. This is the faux masculine Midwestern Rust Belt white man avatar, but it's totally fraudulent because he's actually the radically progressive Minneapolis, communist apparatchik essentially, who has had all these dalliances with the Chinese Communist Party and lied about all these aspects of his background. So I think it flows naturally from the fact that they can't fake it. They can't show any level of authenticity. Just like Kamala talking about her usage of a Glock and she's going to defend her ground even though her party violently opposes the notion of defend your ground laws. It's so transparently disingenuous, it hurts. The fact that we're several weeks from election day with voting already starting all over the country, and you have Barack Obama essentially browbeating black men, essentially saying, I'm going to try to win your vote by calling you misogynist and anti-women. I think all of that is of a piece with the broader issue, which is that if you look at, kind of where the constituencies are right now, you have Donald Trump performing at record levels with blacks, with Latinos, with union households, and basically with everyone except those with high education credentials and affluent white women in the suburbs, and beyond a little bit, obviously, because the gender gap goes beyond just that constituency. But there's all manner of seeming panic from the Kamala Harris campaign. I think the fact that she's going to do an interview with Bret Baier, that she feels compelled to do that now, on top of all manner of other interviews that she's rushed to do, all of it points to a campaign that is not exuding confidence. Combine that with what we're seeing in the internal polling that the Trump camp has put out, and in the battleground states and nationally, the trends all look positive for Donald Trump. I'm not prognosticating, I'm not forecasting that it's going to be a victory or that's going to be a really decisive victory. But there are a lot of data points there, and watching the machinations of the campaign, I think, tells you that whatever we're seeing on the surface level, it's probably worse based upon their own internals. So that's bullish for the Trump campaign, and the gender gap, I think, is going to continue to haunt Democrats going forward. I see a total inability for them to change direction on the issues that might actually resonate with men.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking, listening to you all talk, that, in the mid 2000s, liberals had, I think, two people who you might say provided like a model of their version of masculinity that wasn't completely unappealing to men. And that's Jon Stewart and Barack Obama. Like, there's at least among those two kind of this like intelligent, articulate, sophisticated, like, no, it's not ideal. It's not like the hard, rugged masculinity that, many other people expect, but at least it's something, I think as a result, they weren't just like bleeding support for men more broadly. But now, I mean, I can't even think, Jon Stewart is a shell of himself, and Barack Obama is reduced to lecturing men that they're being misogynist. There's just nothing. And moreover, the Republican Party has managed to kind of shed the stuff that, to the extent it alienated men, stuff like the really aggressive regime change wars, and, basically being a Republican didn't mean, traditional ideals of masculinity. It meant like support for the Iraq War and stuff that we always thought was kind of stupid. In the world of Trump, like, the Republican Party's fixed this problem with men, and the Democratic Party has nothing to offer men at all. I mean, Tim Walz is a joke. He's a caricature of masculinity. He's just I think somebody pointed out, it's like a comedy show, a spinstrel show, where he's just miming what masculinity really is. And I mean, and then one other thing before we transition, that list of things that Kamala put out to try and appeal to black men was the most patronizing thing I've ever seen. She's like, we're going to give $20,000 unforgivable loans to black men. Well, if you're a black man and you're reading that, if you know anything, you're like, that's unconstitutional. Obviously, you can't just give money to people on the basis of race. And then the other one is, we're going to help black men by legalizing marijuana. It's like, well, so you think I'm a pothead? Like, that's the extent? You're like, oh yeah, I know your economic opportunities are bad, but you can stone yourself and that'll help you out. It's a total joke.
Yeah, and then it talked about providing, job training and economic opportunities. Okay, great. But then it specifically mentioned teachers, and it's something like 2% of teachers are black men. So is that the industry that black men are dying to break into? And there's just like systemic racism stopping them from do so. It's just wholly unserious. But let's move to Ben, who is going to cover another wholly unserious topic, which is the Department of Justice suing Virginia for daring to take off non-citizens from its voting rolls.
Thanks. Yeah, so a few weeks back, I highlighted this DOJ guidance that was put out, essentially threatening states and election integrity watchdogs. You better not engage in any sort of, what's the technical term is, list maintenance efforts, that is, voter roll cleanup efforts, of course, which have been on an accelerating basis targeting non-citizens within 90 days of the elections, citing this so-called quiet period provision of the motor voter law of 1993. And that law to some extent contains the original sin in it when it comes to voter registration and election integrity vis-a-vis non-citizens and illegal aliens. The bill solely required that on the form for voting, for registering to vote in federal elections, you check a box attesting to the fact that you are a citizen under penalty of perjury. And while federal vote registration and at state levels, there are all sorts of different standards for what IDs one must produce to vote. In any number of instances, illegal aliens and minimally non-citizens can easily obtain those IDs, including, of course, driver's licenses that non-citizens can obtain in every single state, and illegal aliens can obtain in more than a dozen states. So shifting from motor voter registration to today, we now see that there have been thousands of non-citizens found on voter rolls and removed from voter rolls, particularly in the run-up to this election. I think, frankly, because of the pressure of American citizens who are aghast at the notion that we've had an invasion of millions of illegal aliens and non-citizens, non-illegal non-citizens as well, some percentage of which almost certainly have gotten on the voter rolls because of these lax voter registration standards and identification standards. So the guidance threatened states and election integrity watchdogs, don't you dare clean non-citizens from the voter rolls in the last 90 days of the election. And now the DOJ has acted on those threats, first against Alabama and now most recently against Virginia, both states of which have identified thousands of non-citizens on the rolls and been removing them during this election cycle. So the two cases are a little bit different because Alabama and Virginia have different systems that they're using to try and remove non-citizens. In Alabama's case, they've basically cross-referenced the voter rolls against databases which show those who have non-citizen identification numbers associated with them. And the voter registrars have gone out and sent letters to all the identified voters saying, can you confirm whether you are a citizen or not? Would you like to be removed from the voter rolls? If not, there's a process to basically move you from inactive status that the state is going to put you on to active status. And you can even change that on election day, day of, while you're voting. So you're not going to have your voter rights infringed upon to the extent you're wrongly captured in this voter roll cleanup effort. Virginia has a separate effort, which is not, I think, just rendering inactive people, but keeping them on the voter rolls still. They're actually going to remove people who are identified as non-citizens and then who don't respond and indicate whether they're citizens or not and go through a testing to their citizenship, et cetera. So the DOJ is going after both of these states, saying you're violating this within 90 days of elections, quiet period provision. And it's just incredibly striking. Consider how aggressive, I mean, there are a lot of elements to this, but consider how aggressive the DOJ is being against these states, saying you're violating people's rights by potentially capturing U.S. citizens in these dragnets to identify non-citizens and remove them. You can't do that within 90 days. But you have Jack Smith, who's engaging in election interference on steroids against Donald Trump, clearly in violation of DOJ guidelines minimally, where you're not supposed to pursue political prosecutions. Of course, you should never pursue political prosecutions, but prosecutions of political figures within months of an election because of the obvious issues around election interference, no problem there. But when it comes to non-citizens and illegal aliens on the voter rolls, they're being very aggressive in trying to chill these states' efforts and prevent any efforts to remove non-citizens, of course, to the detriment of election integrity and the votes of citizens. So you have potential election interference. You have disenfranchisement for every American vote that gets diluted as a consequence of this. And it's striking and illustrative of the broader invasion policy, I think, that the administration has put forth, the lawlessness of the Justice Department. We're going to see ultimately what happens in court, whether these challenges stand up or not, whether this ultimately gets rushed to the Supreme Court. But I think this should be an image that's crystallized in the heads of American voters, American citizens today, which is your DOJ is fighting to potentially keep non-citizens and illegal aliens on the rolls. So with that, I wonder, what do you guys all make of the actions the DOJ is taking? Do you think this could potentially be decisive down the stretch of the election?
I am going to tackle a different angle on this, but leave that open to the rest of the group. But the left-wing media reaction to the idea that non-citizens could be voting has been absolutely absurd. I mean, they just reject the idea that it could even happen. And I think we're heading straight into the territory with this DOJ lawsuit of it is happening and it's good that it's happening. Speaker Mike Johnson was ridiculed for advancing the SAVE Act during the latest round of debate over the continuing resolution. He did several media appearances where he was grilled about this idea. People took a clip of him saying that illegal immigrants are going to vote in this election and memed him as if he was being absolutely ridiculous. And Governor Glenn Youngkin just did an interview with Jake Tapper where Jake Tapper was playing Mr. Middle Ground and saying, well, why don't you just abide by what the DOJ says, the timeline the DOJ says you should abide by? And how are you even figuring out that these people are self-identifying as illegal aliens? And his response was so good. He says, well, Jake, they are literally checking the box on the voter registration form that they are not American citizens, or they're leaving the box blank. Then they have 3 attempts to cure it and say that they are American citizens, and they're still declining to do so. That then and only then is when they're removed from the voter rolls. And Jake Tapper sort of looks almost speechless by the response because he couldn't even do the basic modicum of research to back up his assertion that the DOJ is assumed to be right in this case. It's pretty incredible to watch the media just take this idea that it started with voter fraud doesn't happen, and now it's been sort of distilled down into, well, illegal aliens aren't voting. It's all part of the same thread, which is to reject any attempts at shoring up voter integrity in the United States.
Yeah, I find it deeply offensive that the Democrats actually are, out there going ahead. We're going to sue you because you're trying to clean up your voter rolls, and we're trying to ensure that non-citizens can vote if they're able to get through this process. It goes to the heart of what the modern Democrat Party is about. It's about maintaining its own power, and it really just doesn't care. Elon Musk had it right. They want to turn us into a one-party state. They want to be in a position where elections are a pro forma, where they just always win no matter what. They have the numbers, and that's all that matters. It really is just, it's sort of the mask is off. It's one of those things where, if you actually still believe in the joint project of democracy and American citizens voting for who represents them, you wouldn't oppose something like cleaning up voter rolls of non-citizens. But if you're just all about your own power, this is what you would do. And I think Eric Weinstein tweeted out something that it doesn't feel like a normal presidential election in the normal sense, like something else is going on. And I was realizing that this is almost more like a cold civil war that we're resolving through the election process. It's bigger than Trump or Kamala. It's more about like which part of the country gets to run the other. And we're making that decision via what is a bizarre and deeply flawed election process. But that's what it feels like, more than a sort of selection of who's the best person to be the president.
And one of the things that I think a Trump tweet pointed out is that this also dissuades any efforts to add non-citizens last minute to the voter rolls. So all of the get out the vote attempts, registering new voters, trying to slide people under the radar at the very last minute who may or may not be citizens, these sorts of efforts are actively cracking down on it. And so it's not just a question of 90 days outside of the election, what do your voter rolls look like? But as people are registering or attempting to register leading up to the day of, Virginia is attempting to catch those people as they're potentially being added to the list, which is a very good practice, right? This is something we want to see. There should be no time limit on enforcing positive laws such as not allowing non-citizens to vote. But I think it was a really good point to make that it is thwarting any efforts that those who have no respect for our democracy, our process, may be attempting to do last minute under the radar. And it's putting a bright light on any efforts like that and is attempting to catch them off. So I'm not surprised that this has now gathered the ire of a very politically motivated DOJ that we have. But I think it is, to your point, Will, very disappointing for what it actually reflects about the state of our political discourse.
We're going to go ahead and move to Emma's topic, which is the recent SpaceX video that shows them actually catching a rocket that came back from space. It's a pretty stellar advance of technology. So, Emma.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of my favorite things with the video is that the two arms of the rocket booster that are catching the rocket after it was launched into space are actually called the chopsticks. So imagine you're eating sushi, you're trying to pick up your sushi roll, but instead it's a 433-foot rocket or like the 230-foot part of the rocket booster that it's catching like chopsticks back onto Earth. And it truly is just an incredible feat of science, of technology that we have not seen before. And in many senses was this incredible unifying effort that garnered praise from SpaceX, from NASA, from other countries who were just in awe of this incredible achievement. So if you haven't seen the video, you should go and look it up right now because it looks like an AI generated experience that actually happened in Florida. But what's so particularly interesting about it is that this is the 5th rocket launch SpaceX has done. It is the first time, however, that they attempted to recapture the rocket booster. And so the fact that they were successful on the first try is incredibly impressive. But the ramifications of this are huge. First, in an attempt to expand space travel and make it a normal part of the human experience, this actually significantly cuts down on the cost. If you're able to recapture the rocket booster, do minor improvements if there was any damage, and there was slight damage, but according to Elon Musk, not enough that it actually destroyed the rocket, just would have required like a little bit of maintenance to restore it. The goal is that you can actually then cut down the launch period to like an hour-long delay. So it launches 4 or 5 minutes later, it lands back in the sort of giant chopstick rocket booster catcher, and then within an hour after basic maintenance is done, it could be ready to launch again. And so that's a level of space takeoff that just has been previously unimaginable, closer to what we actually see with airline takeoffs. So that could be a huge improvement. And a few of the other things that I thought were really interesting is that SpaceX has uniquely, and really under Elon Musk, has uniquely taken the approach that it's better to launch early to catch any failures, any breakdowns in the system, which means that you do have a higher fail rate, but it also means that you're able to succeed much faster because you're catching the errors and improving them time and time again. And so it just goes to show that like Elon Musk's willingness to fail, his willingness to try new ideas has also set him up for success, that he's the most likely to succeed on this point, rather than taking decades at a time, like you'll often see with NASA or other companies who are working on this. And then another aspect of this that I thought was just utterly ridiculous that sort of points to the ESG bureaucratic mismanagement is that the FAA has on multiple occasions delayed or threatened to shut down the launch of one of the SpaceX rockets simply because there are, quote, potential environmental concerns that it could affect some aspect of the environment nearby. And so this has resulted in lawsuits or threats of lawsuits between SpaceX and the FAA. But it just points to how utterly ridiculous our environmental conversations have gotten, that we have the opportunity to launch the most technologically advanced rockets into space, potentially take people not only back to the moon, but also to Mars. And then you have the FAA citing environmental protection concerns to shut down the entire project, and sort of just like the misappropriation of power that we have here. And how I think many voters and many developers, innovators in Silicon Valley have just become totally burned out on this. So it's not surprising at all that the sort of vitalism and dynamism that you see from the Trump campaign has drawn in Elon Musk and so many others in Silicon Valley, because he's the only president, the only leader who's probably willing to actually give these new technologies a try without simply bogging them down and potentially unnecessary rules. But yeah, and then like the final thing, my daughter is about 18, 19 months now, and her absolute favorite thing in the world is to find planes in the sky. And so if we hear a sound, we'll like be eating breakfast and she'll say plane and gets like so excited. And if we're on a walk and she sees a plane, she starts like shouting and pointing at it, even if it's just a helicopter, because you know it's all the same word right now. And there's something even in like the youngest children that like space travel, planes, flights just capture this like incredible imagination, this magic that I think few other things can replicate. And so even in watching it, it reminds me that there's just this incredible awe and sense of accomplishment that these sorts of SpaceX launches elicit in the broader public, that in coming together and working hard and willingness to fail and try new things, that we can actually accomplish something that is good and that is great as the human race. And I think that desire for greatness, that frustration with the overall lack of technological innovation, the stagnation that we've had for so many decades now, right? Like, congratulations, we have the iPhone 16, right? Your camera can take moderately better pictures with new features. Like, that doesn't actually inspire people to greatness. But the SpaceX launch and similar innovations in space, I think, are just one of the most incredible reminders of the greatness of the human race and how encouraging that is. So that's sort of my white pill update for the week, that there are still great things happening, and that from the smallest child, I think, to the oldest person, it's just a unifying sense of awe. But I'm curious to hear you all's thoughts on it.
Elon Musk had some kind of tweet where he was, I think, referencing Gulliver and the Lilliputians holding back essentially America writ large, and that part of his pitch for Trump was that he would free Gulliver. And this really speaks to, of course, a lot of different themes, largely tied to economics, about, first of all, the entrepreneur being the central actor and, seeking to aspire towards, like you said, not just incremental growth in extant technologies, but literally and figuratively reaching for the stars, aspiring for something greater. That's part of America. That's built into our DNA, or it ought to be. And when you have the administrative state that does everything essentially to counter that, to sabotage and undermine it, it really undermines the fabric of the country. And Musk stands as a symbol against that, even though a lot of what he did initially in his career was with government financing, et cetera. But obviously there have been massive gains to civil society from that taxpayer subsidization, essentially. I agree that we should take pause and recognize these massive gains, and celebrate the entrepreneur again as the most impressive, I think, part of the economic engine of America. And the last thing I'd say, which is sort of a deviation from this point, is despite the fact that Elon Musk continues to find himself and his entities targeted by all manner of government agencies, at home and abroad for that matter, there's still this remarkable dichotomy or paradigm that exists where, on the one hand, he has governments going after him, but on the other hand, governments are really reliant on his technologies. And to some extent, you could say that our First Amendment rights, arguably, in the digital public square, hinge on him continuing to develop technologies that are so significant, so influential, that the government is so dependent on at the end of the day, that they can't or won't destroy X and anything else that he might do in the digital space to ensure that we have a genuine, free, and open flow of information and discourse. So, again, it's not a good place to be in, where essentially you have to rely on Elon Musk him singularly to be too big to destroy, too influential and too helpful, essentially, to a ruling regime to destroy. But literally, in some ways, you could argue our First Amendment rights in large part hinge upon him continuing to produce these technologies such that the regime won't crush him. That's a perilous place to be in, but thank God for Elon Musk.
I think that's a really important point, Ben, especially when we saw what happened with the Boeing Starliner astronauts being stranded in space. It's SpaceX that is planning to rescue them with the date as late as February. So in the next couple of months, they're planning on getting those astronauts back to Earth. And Boeing, sorry, they're already here, apparently. He already did rescue them, I guess. But I know that they did send a SpaceX up to visit the space station. I don't know that they've brought them back yet. But anyway, the Boeing has been the government's golden child for decades. They were supposed to be the premier company in terms of both air and space travel. And two of their astronauts are stranded on the Starliner. They're now relying on SpaceX to bring those two home. And even though they would be loath to work with Elon Musk, but they have no choice because his company is apparently the only one innovative enough to make sure that space travel is happening in a responsible and cost-efficient way, by the way. I don't know if we've mentioned, but the ability to catch this rocket propeller as it comes back could potentially save hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in development for a typical space trip.
Yeah, I mean, I think Peter Thiel described modern America as being a race between whether technology can defeat politics. Essentially, like our advances in technology can overcome the scleroticism of our politics or the descent into doom of our politics. And I mean, the fact that you're seeing all the technologists move very aggressively towards the Republican Party now when they wouldn't have done so 8 years ago, I think is a testament to, where the Democrats are on all this stuff. It's like the party of HR and the party of the Longhouse. It's not the party of ambition and achievement. And what Elon's achieved is incredible. I mean, he actually has a reasonable chance of solving the engineering problems that allow us to make life multiplanetary. He deserves a lot of applause.
And finally, back to Will for his analysis of a new body cam video that shows an Asian police officer with a justified shoot of a knife-wielding Black female assailant, and what all of the conversation has been surrounding this death.
Yeah, so in Fairfax, Virginia, not far from where I used to live and where I think a number of people here probably live, there was a police-involved shooting, and there's a body cam video, and I think Mike Cernovich described it as being out of a horror movie. It really is. The police officer, the person opens the door in front of the police officer, comes out and starts attacking the police officer aggressively with a knife, and continues to go, and the police officer is extraordinarily restrained. In fact, in some ways, I think too restrained for their own self-defense. They're saying, hey, please stop. And even after multiple swings and I think clearly, actual contact made with the knife, the officer finally is forced to shoot this person who's trying to kill them with a knife. And, we have this now with body cam video. And it's really, I think, there is something to the idea that, the police reform movement, they said, we really need these body cams. And police, I think, resisted it to a degree. But the fascinating thing is that once we now have these police body cam videos, what we end up seeing is that the police are actually dealing with these really terrible situations, and the behavior of criminals is just incredible and appalling. And you find yourself having much more sympathy for the police. And with the body cam videos, the police reform movement is expecting to see, here are the police behaving like monsters and aggressively using their guns for no reason. It doesn't happen. And I think it's really pretty remarkable that it turns out to be the end of the police reform movement once you actually have video evidence of what's going on. If you remember all the way back to like Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman, I had a long-term thesis that the reason that these police, these shooting incidents went so viral is that there was no actual proof of what happened because we didn't have any video evidence. So anybody's allowed to further their narrative. But now, every time you have something that even Ben Crump tries to make into some sort of incident, it's like, well, normal people can say, well, there's a video and clearly it was a justified shoot. So, that's a good thing. I think it might just generally be why the sort of, the George Floyd inspired movement is just not really getting much traction anymore at all. And Kamala Harris is trying to emphasize how pro law and order she is. But I'm curious what you guys think about, these sort of body cam videos and police shootings and the state of the, criminal justice reform, anti-police movement in this country.
I think that's totally right, Will. That body cam footage really has nullified a lot of their arguments. We already had the statistics, which did not bear out their thesis when you saw that police were actually less likely to shoot Black suspects when you actually account for how many encounters police have with unarmed Black individuals. There were something like 2 or 3 unarmed Black individuals that did not attack police officers before they were shot in each year for the past 10 years. And then when you have the body cam footage, in addition to the statistics, there's basically no logical argument that could be made that police are out hunting black men, as LeBron James would say. So yeah, I think this really backfired on them. Their efforts for so-called transparency actually disprove their own point. And unfortunately, there are still people, though, who refuse to watch the body cam footage or will spin it in some way to try to justify their BLM, pro BLM talking points. I did see that the Georgetown women's basketball team, which this woman was a member of when she was an undergraduate, posted two tweets mourning her, even though she was an attempted murderer, both of which came after a press release from the Fairfax County Police went out indicating that she had attacked this officer with a knife. And I would just posit as a Georgetown alum, that's probably why they haven't been in the March Madness tournament since 2012, because they don't hold any of their players accountable or responsible for their behavior.
Amber, that's hilarious. I'll let you just stick to that. Yeah. And so, and what's also notable about this is that the police officer was going to conduct a wellness check after she was reported from a mental health agency as being in an agitated state. And so and this just gets into like the complicated relationship between crime, between mental health, and what the best response is here. So clearly it was a situation where the social workers who were monitoring her case either did not feel safe to go check on her or felt like they had reached the end of their ability to help her. And so at that point, they're calling in the police. And this is actually a bit of a reverse of how I think it often goes down. Usually the police are aware of a situation with a mentally unfit or unhealthy person, and then they call in social workers once they feel like they've done everything that they can do. And so the fact that now the social workers have called the police back into the case mean that it got to a certain point that it was outside the realm of what social workers felt comfortable taking care of. I mean, imagine it being an unarmed person going to the door, right? Maybe the police badge and uniform triggered her in a particular way, but like, what if it had been just a male social worker, right? What if it was a male trigger, not necessarily a police trigger? In that case, you're certainly not armed. Like, does that person lose their life because they went to check on someone who was unfit? That's obviously a terrible situation. So you send in the police who are armed, who are better equipped to handle these violent situations. And then she charges at him expectedly, whatever the situation is. And it's just a horrible situation overall, right? But it really, I think, not only does it poke a hole in the police reform body cam, police are out to get Black men and women argument, but it also suggests that replacing the police force or even supplementing the police force with too many mental health experts is also not going to be a successful tactic. You send in, a female social worker who gets stabbed to death, that's clearly not going to go well. That's not going to be a good situation. So on both fronts, I think this just points out the difficulty and tragedy of the situation, but also the folly of thinking that there are situations that we can simply talk our way through or simply just need like a more therapeutic approach to, because clearly the therapeutic approach would not be sufficient in these incredibly unsafe situations.
And this police officer actually was trained in crisis intervention. So he had this additional supplemental training that is supposed to provide him expertise with dealing with these types of mental health situations. And if anything, it almost cost him his life because he waited until really the very last moment to open fire on this individual after she had already slashed him about 3 times, really let her charge all the way up onto him, and then had to push her away with his arm before firing the gun finally. I mean, he really cut it very close and absolutely could have died.
I don't have much to add in the way of insights, except to say that I think it's a very shrewd take, the notion that having body cams on cops is not only going to prove overwhelmingly exculpatory, but is going to undermine the anti-cop movement by exposing the challenges and the ambiguity in these situations, but then also cops doing the right thing under incredible pressure where literally life and death decisions need to be made within seconds. So I think, the broader point that I would make is all around, why just body cams on cops? Why don't we have this level of transparency on a whole slew of government agents, civil servants, officials. We should have the same level of transparency in a whole slew of other areas. And let's see if it ends up corroborating our view or ends up corroborating the view of the left on what they think our betters in the state are up to.
Gosh, can you imagine if there were body cams in the every COVID meeting with Dr. Fauci and Burke? So it would be incredible. We're going to go to final thoughts. Emma, why don't you take the prerogative to go first?
So my final thought, sort of summarizing all of these discussions, is that I really am a technological optimist. And I think that the more we engage in good technological advancements that actually reveal and improve our ability to interact with one another, our ability to explore new realms such as space, that we're actually going to see this return of the American greatness that I do think characterizes the history of the United States. From its founding and even before. And this idea that technology is meant to propel us to new places, not because it's destroying or suppressing or subverting nature, right? But that's actually revealing human nature, the greatness of human nature in the way that we use it, is probably one of the most positive developments that I've seen. And one of the things that I'm most encouraged about going into these new years, that where we see technology rightly implemented and rightly used, we actually see truth and human flourishing on a much larger scale. And so it's more of like the philosophical take, but I think that's one of the things that sort of unites a few of these political developments and discussions that we're having.
I've got a very brief parting shot, which is, since we haven't mentioned it yet, everyone ought to check out Chris Rufo's latest expose of Kamala Harris's apparent plagiarism in her book. Irrespective of whether or not this is going to be chalked up to or blamed on, pinned on the ghostwriter associated with the book, the fact that it's almost been normalized and we're almost desensitized to the idea that public figures in their books are going to just lift other people's work really is quite a commentary. But this is really a damning indictment of, at the very, very, very best, the amazing laziness of Kamala Harris in not checking this. Rufo goes in great detail showing Wikipedia entries that are lifted, I think academic scholarship that's lifted as well. Another scandal, something of an October surprise. I don't know if it's going to have any impact whatsoever, but well worth your time to check out Rufo's expose.
Definitely. And the media's reaction is hilarious. It's a classic Republicans pounce scenario. The New York Times headline said something like Christopher Rufo seizes on Kamala Harris copied excerpts from her book. My final thoughts are that both of the candidates, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, are apparently preparing to go on Joe Rogan's podcast, which I think is quite the commentary on the current state of mainstream media. He holds a lot of currency, obviously, and independent in media holds a lot of currency in this election. Unlike ever before, people are much more fragmented on where they get their news, and the legacy media simply does not have the monopoly on information that it used to. And I think that terrifies them, and that's why I think they've exposed themselves so much with where they really stand on the issues, because they're sort of lashing out in desperation to retain what power they used to have over the electorate. That is all but gone. And then from a political standpoint, I hope to God that Kamala Harris does the Joe Rogan interview. I suspect that nobody on her team has actually watched his podcast or is a regular listener, because if they were, they would be absolutely steering her in exactly the opposite direction from appearing on there, because nothing is off limits. If Joe Rogan feels dissatisfied with an answer, he will keep pushing until he gets one. And Kamala is not known for that. So I think that this is a very foolhardy idea for them. But I hope that they do it.
Yeah, kind of continuing on that theme, the fact that she's about to do an interview with Bret Baier on Wednesday, I think if I were her advisor, that I would be like, absolutely not. Absolutely. Under no circumstances are we going to do an interview with Bret Baier. Because, Bret isn't some MAGA guy, but in a sense, it's almost like this is the worst possible option. You'd be better off doing an interview with Hannity, who kind of might look somewhat clownish, and you'd be able to dismiss it as, a partisan battle. Like, Bret Baier is just going to ask you the hardest possible questions he can think of. and then not let you get away with non-answers. And that's terrible for her, because there are a slew of different topics she has no good answer for. She's got a bazillion positions that she's flipped on in the last 4 years. I mean, think of all the ads we're seeing about her supporting trans surgeries for prisoners and taxpayer funding for that. She's just not quick on her feet. She's not agile. So, I think this interview is going to go terribly for her. She would be much better off in a Fox News debate with Trump. She probably should have accepted that one that was offered a while back. But man, a one-on-one interview with Bret Baier is the last thing I would recommend. Any other interviewer on any other network, really any other forum, would be better than this. I think she's about to get wrecked.
It's pretty incredible how she's kind of stuck between this rock and a hard place of voters wanting to know more about her, but she can't, as you said, be agile. So she just gives these same rehearsed responses every time she appears in public. And it becomes this losing scenario, this lose-lose, where the more voters see of her, the less that they like her. And the polls have borne that out amid her media blitz. Trump appears more likely to be 3 to 4 points up in pretty much every swing state. But that's going to close us out for this week on NatCon Squad. As always, thanks for tuning in. On behalf of Ben, Emma, and Will, I'm Amber Duke, and we'll see you next week.